Why, like, clap your hands? Oh, that's what I needed to do. Amazing. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are gathered here today, both virtually and in person, as one connected church community. And also this morning, we are a joint service of the Northwest UU Church and the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Detroit. Good morning. I am Reverend Julie Brock, and I will be your worship leader this morning. It is my first time doing it in this church. Please be gentle. It's not my first time being up here, you are very right, but it's my first time doing the worship leader role because today we have the honor of having Reverend David Pyle in our pulpit. He is the Mid-America region lead for the Unitarian Universalist Association, which means that having him here is kind of a big deal. We give him a round of applause. If you are a visitor online and you'd like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form appearing in the chat box now. And if you're with us here in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium at that little table out there. We have just a few announcements to share with you. One of them is that the Northwest Board of Governors has voted to give Ben Gable a 2-month sabbatical, and Ben will begin his sabbatical on March 16th after we've launched our annual canvas. In his absence, we're going to need administrative tasks to be done. So if you have office skills or you think you might be able to acquire office skills and you're willing to give an hour of your time in Ben's absence a week, please fill out the link available in the newsletter. Another thing we're really going to try to do before Ben leaves is get all of Northwest's governing documents in one place. So if you have something on your computer and you think that at one point the Northwest Board officially voted to make that policy and no one else has it, can you send it to Ben? If you have procedures and policies that you think will make running the life of Northwest easier, can you send those to Ben? If you have favorite chalice lightings for beginning meetings, send those to me. I like those. Thanks for all willing to help while Ben is gone. There is going to be a sound gong meditation for 1 hour Saturday, March 7th at 7 p.m. You can talk to Mark Denny and Nancy Ladden about that, and I'm sure more information is in your order of service and on the slides. And there's one last thing I want to talk to you all about. Yesterday, Reverend David Pyle and Lauren Weiss, who is now our, and when I say our, I mean First UU and Detroit's congregational life consultant with the UUA, were here they were here in Michigan. We met at First Church Detroit with some of the leaders of the board and the transitions team, and we talked about this joint ministry thing. And we talked about what was on our minds and hearts, our fears, anxieties, hopes. We made deep connections with one another, and I'm very excited about the future. And so if you have any questions about what happened during that conversation, questions about the joint ministry, or questions at all about Unitarian Universalism, life, the world, and anything, David Pyle will be with us for a community conversation after this. I know, he said anything they want to ask about the UUA. I slightly broadened it. He will be here for a community conversation in the sanctuary about 15 minutes after the end of service. So get your coffee, get your nibbles, we'll make a circle. And it'd be lovely to be able to share with each other some of the things that happened yesterday, the spirit, the anxiety quelling. I had a wonderful time. And one last thing I want to mention is yesterday, we had 3 consultants from the Unitarian Universalist Association here with us. We had Reverend David, we had Lauren White, and we had Kayana Dene, who is the intern, or the resident for the region. All of them are helping in different ways. I know that some of us have not always felt entirely served by the UUA. I've heard that come up. I've felt it myself at times. But folks, I want you to hear me when I say this. We are being served well now. And that is important, and that is good, and that is big. And if you have any questions about that, or you want to get in touch with your UUA folks, you can talk to Lauren, you can talk to me. I'm pointing at David, but we should really actually talk to Lauren. You can talk to me and I can get you Lauren's information, or Diana can, or Sharia can. So with that, we are going to start this beautiful service where we're all in the room together. So let's take a deep breath first. Todd. I want to take a moment to shift our mood as we begin our worship service with a land acknowledgement. We honor and pay respect to the land on which we live and work, which was violently stolen through colonialism, genocide, and forced removal of its traditional stewards. These stewards are the Anishinaabeg, the Council of Three Fires, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, also known as the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. We also acknowledge people of African descent who were forcibly removed from their land and separated from their families through kidnapping and enslavement. We pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be with you all this morning. Our chalice lighting this morning is very dear to me. It comes from, it was written by the Reverend Dr. James Villa Blake in 1894 for the congregation that ordained me to the Unitarian Universalist ministry, the Unitarian Church of Evanston, Illinois. And you may have heard it before. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit to join our voices in singing hymn number 1012 from the Teal hymnal from Singing the Journey, titled When I Am Frightened.
Surely I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand?
A church for all. Sunday waking. Day is breaking. Let's go to our church for all. Church bells ringing, joyful noises. Choir singing, laughing voices. Candles glowing, banners flowing. Come enter our church for all. Weak and healthy, neat and messy. Poor and wealthy, plain and dressy. All embracing, spirit gracing, each one at our church for all. Bodies wiggling, mommies reading, children giggling, daddies pleading. Toddlers flailing, babies wailing. There's room at our church for all. Hands receiving, hands connecting. Hearts believing, hearts accepting. Feel the spirit. Can you hear it? It's here at our church for all.
So we're going to carry the flame to our classes now, and carry the spirit of the church of the service with us. And I have all the children come down the aisle, and we're going to go to our 4 classes, and I'll help you guys figure out there to get those exactly. There's a few minutes. Okay, you may rise and sing the children out.
One purpose of a religious community is to tend future generations. Another is to encourage all who gather together to grow more generous in spirit and action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will mutually support this self-supporting congregation and the Share the Plate recipient. Northwest shares 50% of its plate collections with a local 501c3 charity organization. The social justice team has selected the Ruth Ellis Center as our February plate collection recipient. Founded in 1999, the Ruth Ellis Center has established a national reputation for quality and innovation in providing trauma-informed services for lesbian, gay, bi-attractional, transgender, and questioning youth and young adults, with an emphasis on young people of color experiencing homelessness, involved in child welfare system, and or experiencing barriers to health and well-being. You can do so in a variety of ways. You can give in a variety of ways that are now available on your screen. And for those in person, we will pass a collection basket for checks and cash. Today, during our time of community sharing, I would like to highlight one, not highlight, I would like to uphold one community sorrow. It is with sadness that we share the news that Kathy Henry, former moderator of this congregation Northwest, died on February 20th after a 17-month-long battle with cancer. A celebration of Kathy's life is being planned for the spring at Northwest. Please hold Kathy's wife, Karen, and their two sons, James and Ben, and in your love and care during this difficult time. The Minister of Pastoral Care, Teresa Rolk, will be holding a Zoom session on Friday for all to come and share memories of Kathy, because the memorial won't be until the spring. And if you're feeling like you need extra care after this service, the Chair of Pastoral Care, Mary Mueller, will be in the library, room E, for anyone who needs to talk or wants to share memories of Kathy, feel heard, and feel comforted. For right now, I'd like to light a candle and invite Trina up, a dear friend of Kathy's, to say a few words in remembrance of her.
I don't have my stool. Um,
Oh, it's behind there, do you want it? It's behind the seat, is it this yellow one? It's for the kids.
Now I'm too tall. I think Kathy held a very special place in a lot of our hearts. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that even though we're not doing joys and sorrows, that there's still a time in this space to just remember all of the leadership and conversations and support she has given so many of us, personally and in this congregation. For me, I remember Kathy sitting at my kitchen table with me early on when I was often coming to church just completely distraught because I have very complex children. And Kathy understood that deeply and sat with me and made it okay for me to know that I was going to have to fight like hell for years and years. And she helped to validate that. And she also allowed me to see that our kids can grow up and thrive even under really complicated circumstances. So Kathy was so much of a mentor and someone that I saw that I was like, oh, it is possible. And my kids will be okay. I will be okay. And also it was the support that all of this community has given to both of our families that has been so critical. So just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible life. And as I heard yesterday, she's been promoted, right? She's been promoted up. And you know, or wherever we promote our people, right? And that made me feel just really good thinking about the idea that she's gonna help us in a different way.
Sources of radiance and resilience. Keep watch with those who work or watch or weep this night. May the suffering be soothed. May the sick be tended. May the weary find rest. May the dying and those who love them find peace. May the joyous be shielded. And may all of us know that we are surrounded by a love that is with us always. a web that connects us to all that exists. I invite us now to spend a few moments in this space, feeling our bodies connect to this room, to each other, and to what is beyond. We will sit in silence together, and then we will come out singing.
In my heart, all the stirrings of compassion, blowing the wind, rising the sea, moving mine, giving life the shape of justice. Roots only grow, wings set me free. Spirit of light, come to me, come to me.
So in 2001, the Meadville Lombard Theological School, our denominational identity seminary here in the Mid-America region in Chicago, invited the Reverend Dr. Alice Blair Wesley to come give a series of 6 lectures to the student body and to the faculty on the topic of covenant. These were called the men's lectures. At the end of the 4th lecture, Alice gave what for her was her best approximation of the promise at the center of Unitarian Universalism at that time. And I want to share that promise, that covenant with you all this morning. Though our knowledge is incomplete, our truth partial, and our love uneven. From our own experience and from the witness of our faith tradition, we believe that new light is ever waiting to break through individual hearts and minds to illumine the ways of humankind. That there is mutual strength in willing cooperation, and that the bonds of love keep open the gates of freedom. Therefore, we pledge to walk together in the ways of truth and affection as best we know them now or may learn them in the days to come, that we and our children may be fulfilled, and that we may speak to the world with words and actions of peace and goodwill. I invite you all to rise as you are willing and able, and join in singing hymn number 129 in the gray hymnal, Let Love Continue Long, number 129. So I want to thank Reverend Julie and the leadership of both the Northwest U congregation and the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Detroit for inviting me back to preach a second shared worship service. It is a joy to be on this journey with you, your two congregations, as you explore what it could mean to be in deeper relationship with one another. One of the things I shared with the boards of the two congregations and the nascent transitions team as we met yesterday is that we can no longer be single, isolated, individualist congregations in these difficult and dangerous times. We Unitarian Universalists need one another to be what it is that this world needs us to be. It is good to be on that journey with you as your UUA regional lead. And you never know if a sermon was actually good until you get invited back. Besides serving as your regional lead for the Mid-America region of the UUA, one of the things I named last time in the sermon was that I am also a U.S. Army Reserve chaplain. One of the joys of being an Army chaplain is that I am in professional working relationship with ministers, fellow chaplains from some very different faith traditions than Unitarian Universalism. Over just the last 8 years in this ministry, I have been in direct shared ministry with 3 Roman Catholic priests, 1 conservative rabbi, 1 Reform rabbi, several Pentecostal ministers, 2 Episcopal priests, numerous, and I mean numerous, evangelical ministers, a Presbyterian minister, 6 Southern Baptist pastors, and a pastor for the African American Episcopal Church, 1 Buddhist priest, and many, many more. Now, these are not just interfaith collegial relationships. We are all in ministry together, essentially serving the same congregation. In essence, my current supervisor is a Southern Baptist. I have been the supervisor for many others, and let me tell you, some of them have had a challenging experience with a Unitarian Universalist as their ministry supervisor. I have also been the training supervisor for over 60 U.S. Army chaplain candidates from all different faith traditions. And over my 17 years in the Army Chaplain Corps, I have been in such ministerial relationships with hundreds of other military chaplains, many of them, as I said, from very different faith traditions than our own, often very religiously conservative faith traditions. And in most cases, I am the first Unitarian Universalist they have not only ever met, but ever even conceived of. I could not count the number of conversations that I've had trying to explain what it means to be part of a covenantal faith, where we do not even pretend that we believe the same things, and yet are in committed community with one another. These military chaplain colleagues will ask me what I believe about God and Jesus and heaven and hell and salvation and sin, and I will tell them. And when they are hovering on the edge of apoplexy, and in some cases I am beginning to worry about their blood pressure, I issue the coup de grace. I say, but you know, that's just me, just my faith. Many Unitarian Universalists have very different ideas about these things than I do. Mind blown. Look of total confusion. What? I thought you were telling me what Unitarian Universalists believe. Oh no, I say. Most of the congregations I have served have thought my beliefs to be quite odd. That's what makes it fun. Now we in this shared worship service this morning, both in person and online, I bet we get what I'm saying here, because we've lived it. But my dear military chaplain colleagues, at this point, either storm off in complete confusion, usually with some comments about heresy in the afterlife, or they become really, really curious about Unitarian Universalism and about how a faith tradition like ours could even exist and even thrive. It is that second group I know I'm going to like. And I have learned more about Unitarian Universalism from their questions than I ever did from attending a Unitarian Universalist seminary. The idea of a faith tradition that is not bound together by a shared doctrine, a set of beliefs, is a very difficult thing for my colleagues to grasp. A long conversation with one of my colleagues a few summers ago, an African-American Southern Baptist pastor from Oklahoma, in which we were stuck in the car together for like days, in which I discussed the idea of our congregations being bound in covenantal relationship and committed to building the beloved community. After several days of our talking, he looked at me and he said, "So basically, you are trying to be the church that Jesus talked about, rather than a church that believes all the things about Jesus." I told him that I would not have framed it that way. And I don't know how often we actually achieve being that kind of community, but I could go with that understanding. And I still believe some of those things about Jesus, even if some other Unitarian Universalists did not. Being the beloved community, being the church that Jesus talked about in my friend and colleague's words and understanding, it is a high idea. It is an amazingly difficult standard that we set for ourselves as Unitarian Universalists. Setting forth ideals as radical as justice, interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and love at the center of all of our commitments to one another makes being in religious community together a difficult and sometimes painful spiritual practice. We ask a lot of these religious communities that we create, and we hold those communities up to a set of ideals that we can only ever strive to achieve. Whether framed in the language of these values or in the language of the principles of interdependence, the right of conscience, and the inherent worth and dignity of every person as found in our 7 principles, truly living Unitarian Universalism, both in community and in our own lives, can be difficult. When I have the in-depth and serious conversations with those curious military chaplain colleagues of mine about Unitarian Universalism, one of the most common reactions that they have is that they cannot believe that we pull it off. That we are able to remain in religious community with each other. They think of their own congregations and try to imagine being in a religious community without some identifiable unifying center of belief, of scripture, of theology, or of practice. And what they tell me is that they cannot imagine it. They cannot imagine how such a congregation could remain together without that kind of identified and identifiable center. Because they know that religious community is always challenging. Think about it. We invite people into community and ask them to invest their highest aspirations. Ask them to invest their deepest selves. Ask them to be vulnerable. We call people into relationships amidst that vulnerability. And we are also in those communities learning how to be human religiously. And so in that aspirations, in that vulnerability, we can hurt one another, even when we do not intend to. This is not just true of Unitarian Universalism. This is true of any and every religious community. My military chaplain colleagues see this in their own traditions, and they know that in those times when the community is not at its best, when there is conflict that is not engaged well, and when people are wounded within the community, they know that they can turn to their sacred story, to their sacred ritual, to their sacred beliefs that hold the center of the community together, and they cannot imagine how we are able to hold our communities together without having such a shared common creed. What I tell them is that in Unitarian Universalist congregations, at least when we are at our best, what rests in the center of our faith tradition is a promise, is covenant. Not a covenant, not words on a page, not something printed on the wall of a church, not even a covenant like the one my ordaining church has said in every worship service since 1894. But covenant as a verb, covenant as a noun, not as a noun. Covenant as action, as a way of being. Covenant or a promise as a commitment to relationship with one another. Covenant is a sacred promise made to each other. A sacred promise that holds us together even when being together is hard. Oh, our congregations have covenants that are nouns, and I do believe that we should have written covenants and other things to remind us of that commitment, of that promise. The Unitarian Universalist Association that I've worked for this last decade as a congregational life consultant and now as your regional lead, our association exists because there is a covenant, a promise made between congregations that congregations will support each other, will be in community with one another. Between you and the over 1,000 other Unitarian Universalist congregations across the country and the world. It is from that covenant, that promise, that the 7 principles and the 6 sources come. And it is the language of that covenant that our faith tradition is exploring right now in looking at language about values with love at the center. The covenant that is a sacred promise between all of our congregations is also a manifestation of what your 2 congregations, what First Detroit and what Northwest UU, you are exploring that covenant together now. A covenant is a set of promises that we make to one another as Unitarian Universalist religious community in light of something larger than ourselves. A covenant is a commitment to the relationships we have with one another and to making, maintaining, and strengthening those relationships a religious practice, even when and especially when times are difficult. And we make that commitment to relationship because together we can achieve something together that we cannot do alone. Because these religious communities we form matter not only in our own lives, but in the lives of people we have never even met and may never meet. One of the blessings of my role being in working with over 400 congregations in the last decade is I get to see all the lives that are saved by our faith tradition, even when the congregations themselves never get to. Hosea Ballou, one of the preeminent Universalist ministers of the 1800s, who systematized much of the American Universalist thought that has grown into the Unitarian Universalism of today, he captured this sense of covenant in his oft-quoted axiom: if we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement will do us any good. In this, he was not calling upon our congregations to not have conflict, to not have disagreement. He was not saying that we have to think alike. He was calling us to, even in our disagreements, to keep covenant, to keep love at the center of our communities and our commitments to each other. The practice of covenant, or keeping covenant as a verb, comes down to this: keeping love at the center. And I tell you, it's a hard practice. It's hard for me, especially right now, at this moment in our country's history. In my civilian ministry, which is why I'm here with you today, I'm a member of the UUA Congregational Life Staff, or the part of the UUA that focuses on direct support to congregations in the challenges and opportunities that congregations face. A part of that has always been helping congregations to learn how to engage conflict, how to do that well, how to do that in a generative way. Because conflict can be one of the more transformative experiences that a congregation has, when engaged well, open-hearted, and within the covenant. But I will tell you, over the last 3 years, and I'd say maybe a little bit longer, my fellow congregational life staff members and I have noticed that our congregations are having a significant increase in conflicts that are not engaged well, that are not held in covenant, that wound vulnerable people in ways they did not need to. I'm in my 12th year total doing this work on district and regional staffs, and the last 3 years has felt to me like helping congregations engage conflict is almost all of what I do. And what is more, in the last 7 years, I've seen an increase in people engaging in those conflicts in ways that can intentionally cause harm to other people in their religious communities. I've seen an increase in people who choosing not to engage and keep love at the center, to remain in that covenantal promise. It's not hard for us to guess what happened in our country 7 years ago that may be feeding this change in the dynamics of our entire culture and society, not just our congregations. We're experiencing a time in our country where fear and division are being used as political weapons, even more obviously than they always have been, no matter what damage it may cause to those around us. And where many, and especially those in our congregations and in our communities who are historically marginalized and are targeted because of their identities, because of their racial identity, their gender identity, their sexual identity. Where many right now are rightly fearing being made the enemy, or target of that fear and division that has been stirred up for reasons of political purpose and unleashed upon our culture. It is in such moments as this that our practice of covenant, our promises to one another, to hold one another in love, to recognize and keep that love at the center amidst the vulnerability that is a natural part of religious community. It is in such moments as this, when we are feeling afraid and uncertain, that we most need to hold one another in love, even and especially when it's hard. Not a love that does not name when we are hurting, or when we are afraid, or when there is injustice. For as Dr. Cornel West says, justice is what love looks like in public. Love never calls us not to speak our truth. Love calls us to speak that truth with compassion and empathy for each other. Love calls us to hearing not one another only through the lens of our own perceptions and experiences, but opening up our hearts to hearing the perceptions and experiences of those that we are in relationship with, in our workplaces, in our families, virtual or not, and maybe especially within our religious communities. Why do we have to be especially careful to share our truth in love and listen with compassion and empathy in our religious communities? Because here, within these physical and virtual walls of our congregations, within these relationships. We have invited people to be vulnerable, to risk their deepest selves, to share those values that connect to their identity, to how we understand who we are as people and as a community, and to trust one another with that which is most sacred. That care for one another, where we share our truth and do so with a love for the other in our hearts. That is the love, to me, that is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. That is the beloved community. That is the heart and the practice of covenant that is at the center of our faith. So may it be. Blessed be. And amen. I invite you to rise. No. Choir is doing it next.
What you sow, you will reap. Reap what you sow. What you plant in your life will surely grow. And what you grow with love will surely bloom. And the fruit of your labor will come back to you. What you sow, you will reap. Reap what you sow. What you plant in your life will surely grow. And what you grow with love will surely bloom. And the fruit of your labor will come
kind of awesome. Please repeat after me the words of our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope. The warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Let us take Unitarian Universalism into the world. Let us go out into that world with love at the center, so that amidst all the pain, all the hatred, all the violence, we can bring that love into the places where it is needed. Let us go forth into the world and be the practice of covenant that our world desperately needs. Go forth in peace, creating peace.